Cool. Right.
Just give me a moment. Here we go.
Okay, the timer's on.
Yeah. So here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Thank you for joining us live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. My name is Amir Shahzad, and I'm health and safety lead in Sweden and a founder of Oasis. Oasis is Occupational Health and Safety Institute of Sweden. And at Oasis, our focus is simple: practical safety, real learning, and people's first approach. And today's conversation is very special because we are talking about something that truly matters: is a well-being and the modern safety beyond the compliance. For many years, health and safety has focused highly on rules, systems, and the paperwork. But today, we are asking the bigger questions. Is the compliance really enough? And what roles do leadership, psychology, and well being really play in the safety? So, to explain this, I'm honored to join with our highly respected guest, who's mostly known for the recent conversation he had on a platform with Nibosh. So, it's my great pleasure to welcome you, Mr. Dr. Nick Bell.
Hi.
So Dr. Nick Bell is honorary principal lecturer at Cardiff Metropolitan University in Wales in UK. And I love his LinkedIn profile when he says he's living the best time of his life. He is also a fellow of IOSH and serve as IOSH Thought Leadership Panel. And Nick is also a chartered psychologist with the British Physical Society, bringing a strong psychological perspective to the safety, leadership, and the well-being. Recently, Nick has spoke on Nibosh annual online conference, from where I found him, and on a psychological principle of workplace well-being. So this session, which he done with Nibosh, has attracted 2,800 live viewers and nearly 3,000 on-demand viewers as well. So, which make him quite a famous man in the field of health and safety. And Nick regularly write articles and opinion pieces for the Industrial magazine, and this year he has served as a judge for health and safety category at Construction Excellence Southwest Award, and has really been invited back to the judge again for the next year. So hoping to see you there again. And he spoke as a conference across the UK internationally, including India, Malaysia, and Belarus, covering the topics such as construction safety, leadership, workers' engagement, well-being. And Nick, I think so. In soon you will be invited in Pakistan as well because I'm from Pakistan. So we have some viewers from Pakistan as well. So we will call you over there so you can add one more country into your
Happy to
list.
help.
Yeah. So Nick is widely respected for challenging traditional tick box safety and encouraging up to think deeper, think human, and think smarter. So Nick, welcome to the podcast, and it's a real pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Perfect, Nick. So, Nick, before we go into the big topics, I would love to start with this, which I love to hear. And what originally drew you into the world of health and safety, psychology, and well-being? And at what point do you start questioning the traditional approach?
Okay. So to answer this, I need to go back into time. My first degree was in psychology. I probably graduated while you were still in nappies, so around about 1991. And I then went on to do some additional qualifications. I worked as a youth worker, got qualifications in counselling and in youth work. And I was introduced to a counselling model, Rogerian counselling. It was from a guy called Carl Rogers. And he spoke about humans being naturally driven to achieve their full potential and having to have respect in them, this unconditional positive regard and this faith in humanity. And it really resonated with me strongly. I then trained as a social worker and then worked as a probation officer dealing with offenders. I ended up in a high risk unit, public protection unit, dealing with high risk offenders, including murderers. And that gave me a slightly different view of humanity. But even so, still trying to retain my respect for humans and our desire to change and to live positive lives. I took a sideways move into health and safety in 2002 and went through the kind of classic route, I guess, of getting my NEBOSH certificate, my NEBOSH diploma. And I was then working at a university on a university estate. And I introduced this red, yellow and green card system. So we would turn up as estates officers. If we saw that there was a dangerous situation that needed an immediate stopping of work, we'd issue a red card, not as a punishment, but just to say, like, this is a formal notice just to stop work while we sort things out. If work could continue and we needed some adjustments, we'd issue a yellow card. And if things were really good, we'd issue a green card. And then it got me thinking about, why do I think that's a particularly good way of managing people or managing safety? What is it about my training or my psyche that makes me think that's a good way to motivate people or to bring about positive change? So I started a master's degree just to begin to look more introspectively at my own practice, at my own thinking. And as part of that, I started looking at other card systems that were then currently being operated by other construction companies. So they were sometimes called football card systems, and like with a red card or a yellow card. And the way that these schemes were operated by some construction companies, it was like, if you did something really bad, you get a red card and you'd be kicked off site. Sometimes they even called the person who was whose behaviour was seen as being bad, they would call them an offender. Like, really? We're calling these people criminals? I thought it was only like the courts who could call people criminals. But anyway, and there was no way of like rewarding them. And if you got a yellow card, it was like you would have to go for mandatory retraining. And is that really correct? Is that like every transgression down to people wanting to do something bad or not having sufficient knowledge or motivation? And it began my process of thinking about, what is it that we as safety people, what must we assume about people's motivation if we just start, punishing them if they do something that we see as being wrong? So that was basically the subject of my master's degree, and really got me thinking about and questioning, let's call it the traditional approaches to safety, where we set down rules and regulations and then we monitor and we give people feedback, but sometimes not in a very constructive way. I began to introduce those kind of concepts and those ideas into my day-to-day work, and then that launched me into my PhD, where I began looking at leadership and worker engagement. And I started at that point I was able to synthesize the values and knowledge that I'd developed as a psychologist into my practice more. And so, went into the worlds of occupational psychology, human resource management, took those theories and built my PhD around it. And in that process, got a much, much deeper, better understanding of what we mean by well-being as well. How we can practically improve well-being and why we ought to do that. So, in a nutshell, that's what got me to where I am.
That's perfect. And you were talking about 1991. I was born in 1992.
Baby boy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, Nick, that was a good idea, and the most famous thing which you did recently, in my eyes, you have done a lot of good things. From where I found you is the Nibosh conference. So, you recently spoke at Nibosh about the workplace well-being. So many organizations talk about well-being, but for from your experience and from your perspective, where do you think the leaders get this wrong?
Yeah. I think that's a great question, and I think we can go all the way back to start. What do we actually mean by well-being? If we're not even clear about what well-being means, is it physical fitness? Is it mental health? Is it a lack of stress in our lives? I mean, what do we mean by it? And so we need to get that definition right. And I think the first thing we get wrong is just not being clear about the language and definitions. And in the NEBOSH conference, and to the viewers today, I would recommend that you go and look at the World Health Organization definition. So well-being is like a positive state, and it comes about because we're able, when we're able to contribute effectively to our communities, we connect with other people, we're able to live good lives, and we work and live with purpose. Many other things. But if we get that definition right, we can then begin to think about more constructively about how do we actually improve people's well-being or maintain their well-being. And that's when we need to start looking at outside of the health and safety field and start drawing in knowledge and information from people like occupational health and psychology. If we look at well-being purely from, I guess, a classic health and safety perspective, we'll look at it, I think, often in terms of harm prevention. How do we prevent people becoming stressed and poorly at work? And we do need to do that, and that is absolutely important. But so the second mistake I think leaders make is to see well-being purely in terms of like a stress management approach, which is important. But if we're serious about well-being, we need to start thinking about how do we actually create this positive state for our workers. And it's at that point we need to look at things like meeting their psychological needs. Like, I want to feel competent, I want to have control over my life, I want to feel connected to other people, I want to have a sense of purpose and a sense of achievement. Once we understand that these are the things that will fuel that sense of well-being, then we can start to think about how are we organizing and managing work in a way that can help to meet those psychological needs for our workers. And then when to answer those questions, and we're going to have to also start thinking about things like leadership skills and management skills. How do we work with and treat and talk to our workers? If we're turning up day after day and we're just shouting at our workers, and they're in work which to them just feels pointless and meaningless and degrading, then they're probably not going to have a great sense of well-being. So I think there's some of the key points to answer your question. And then another thing that I've seen that I'm a little bit concerned about at times is where leaders are told that they need to do something about well-being or stress, and all they do is appoint mental health first aiders. I do think mental health first aiders do really genuinely have a role to play. I think they are valuable because they can help people to open up and talk about issues that they might otherwise be keeping to themselves. So I think that's important. But some companies, their whole well-being strategy is just appoint some mental health first aiders, and that's really, it's like putting a sticking plaster on somebody after they've fallen over. We need to stop people from falling over in the first place. But anyway, so I think there's some of the key messages I'd get across.
And I think so. You are quite right at this, and we have to set the definition right. And we can find a definition on World Health Organization, and different platforms which are giving the definition that is right. And stress management is the main thing, but I think so. You are right on this part that we just focus on stress management, There are more other things which we can do in order to make the daily life of the worker who's coming for work. So, as Nibosh also says, that it is our moral responsibility to help the worker and ensure that if he's coming to the site, he goes back safe. So that is
Right.
most important thing.
Right.
And shouting on the workers is exactly not what we want. So well-being is an important thing. Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to jump in on the word, a phrase there, the moral responsibility. So I'm possibly answering a question that might come up later about where our profession is going, but I think we need to have a honest discussion in our profession and with other professions and with our leaders about what what drives us, what are our values, do we, what's our view of workers. So with my Rogerian counselling, so this was at the age of 22, so at that point you would still have been in nappies, Amir. But I was introduced to these concepts about really seeing the best in humanity and respecting them and appreciating that we're trying to fulfill our potential and live good lives. That was a really formative time for me, and that got integrated into my core sense of values and beliefs about people. But as a profession, do we all see that? Is that how we see humanity, or do we see humans as little robots that have to go off and obey rules and do what they're told? Do we actually, in our hearts, genuinely feel this moral responsibility? And where does that moral responsibility end? Are we there purely to prevent harm? Well, I could prevent harm by putting a gun to somebody's head and tell them to follow the rules. And if they don't follow the rules, well, I'm going to just put them out of their misery. So that would, we can find quite horrible ways of getting people to obey rules. Is that morally correct? Is that an ethical way of behaving? And then the managers and the leaders we're working with, are they, what's their view of humanity and their workers? Do they see them as just tools to earn them profit? Or do they see them as valid, respect-worthy human beings as well? So this whole thing about moral responsibility, I find that a really interesting and emotive topic to talk about. What are we actually driven to do? And I'm waffling now at me, but like you here today, you've got this real sense of mission and passion to try and promote health and safety and encourage people into the profession and help people get, to work more effectively. I mean, is that that's a strong, coming from a strong sense of values and ethics and morality. And it would be kind of interesting to understand how common that is in our profession and whether the leaders we're working for share those same values. And they're difficult conversations to have. And I do wonder whether we need to equip ourselves better to have these just honest discussions with people.
That's right. And these honest discussions are always wanted in all the organizations. And I think so when people will start talking about these things honestly and listen it properly, then it will make a big change. So Nick, one thing I really value about your work is that it's not theoretical, it's the practical things. So the next question I would like to ask is, how do the leadership decisions and everyday's behavior actually increase or reduce the risks on the ground?
Okay, I mean that's a whole massive topic because we can start by saying like leaders need to have to be putting the systems in place that allow us to manage risks. So, before we got started, we were talking about, we're just having a general chit chat, and I've talked about weekly look back and look ahead meetings in construction where we'll have a program where we know that next week we're supposed to have certain activities taking place. But sometimes things happen. A delivery gets delayed. A crane's not going to turn up when we expect. A weather forecast comes in, it's going to be really bad. A piece of work has been delayed for some reason that we weren't expecting. And then that has loads of knock-on consequences. Like a really good leader for me in that situation would bring in the supervisors, would sit down and just have this sensible conversation. This is what the program says should be happening. These are some of the issues that have cropped up. Are there any other issues that have occurred? Okay, so the crane's not going to arrive. What's going to be the implications of that? Oh, we're going to have a load of material hanging around that we hadn't expected to have hanging around. Where are we going to store it? What's going to be the impact on the logistics? Actually, because that crane's not going to be here, what opportunities might we have to go in and get some work finished that we might have had to delay until after the crane had done its job? And so we can begin to have these really sensible, effective conversations that accept that real life isn't perfect. We aren't always going to be able to meet our program and expectations, but together we can come up with creative, adaptive solutions that get the job done. In having those conversations, we get to understand what the potential risks and pinch points and difficulties can be, and we can make sure we're getting the right resources to the right places at the right time to deliver what we need to be delivered and to manage the potential health and safety hazards along the way. So I think going back to the question, it's leadership can help to create these sort of systems where we are able to have these mature grown-up conversations with supervisors. Supervisors can have those mature grown-up conversations with their own teams. And we're not expecting people to follow a program that, or rules or procedures that actually aren't right. So another example we were talking about, in construction, we'll have this blanket rule that everybody has to wear a hard hat at all times on the construction site. But we've got somebody inside painting a wall. There is no risk of anything falling onto their head. And every time they look down to get some paint, the hat falls off and lands in the paint pot. I mean, or you should be wearing a chin strap then. Well, okay. But we sometimes create rules that are, for us, easy to observe and easy to measure and monitor, but actually don't make sense to the people on the ground. So can we have an honest conversation about what rules actually make sense in what situations? We do need to have rules and we do need to have structures, absolutely, but we need to make sure that they reflect reality and actually manage risks in a meaningful way. And we aren't just introducing rules just because it's easy for us, like, oh, everybody's got to wear all this PPE, even though it doesn't actually help anybody. So I think there's something about leaders creating systems and accepting there's going to be flexibility and adaptability, and real life isn't perfect, and making sure the procedures do reflect reality. And I'm waffling on, so I'll leave it there. I'm sure there's things we can pick out of that.
Exactly, and I totally agree with you on this point. So the rules nowadays are not realistic, and the leadership is not very adaptive towards the thing. And especially during my professional career, what I found is this: whenever companies are tendering, they are not giving the realistic timelines. So the timeline should be realistic, rules should be realistic, and the most important is adaptability. That is very right. So Nick, many people are watching today are mostly the safety professionals, managers, team leads, or the business owners. So if you could give them one mindset shift to improve the safety and well-being immediately, what it would be?
Talk to people. Talk to people. That's it. Yeah. And when I say talk to people, I'm not saying talk at people. Talk to them. And I think there is a real value in having at least a basic grounding and good listening skills. I'm not suggesting everybody would need to run off and have a counselling qualification like I have, but just some basic listening skills. So you can ask a question, you get the answer back, you're able to paraphrase it or to feed that back to people and talk it through. So as an example, I could be walking through a site and I see somebody surrounded with what I think is a load of mess. I could turn up to them and say, that's a trip hazard. Why have you created a trip hazard? You need to sort that out. But is that really going to be the most effective approach? Well, I don't think so, because that's probably going to get their back up. But I could instead say, I am Nick, I'm from the safety team, I'm just walking through site. Who are you? And I've noticed there's a lot of material hanging around. Well, could you just talk me through what's happening? And they could say something like, oh, God, I was expecting this delivery earlier today. It's arrived late. I'm in the middle of unpacking everything. Yeah, I've got a load of packaging material around me, but I need to get this stuff put away straight away. All of a sudden, I've got this completely different insight into what's going on. It's not like a blatant disregard for rules of safety. Somebody's been hit with an unexpected situation. I can then say, okay, well, in my mind, I can imagine somebody tripping up on that. Would you agree? Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so what can we do? What can I do to help manage this? Oh, actually, I could do with a mate to come and help me. Okay, well, let me give a manager a ring. We'll get, or could we just set up some tape around me just so I've got a little bit of a work area and people will walk around me? Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Or God forbid it me, and maybe I actually help and move some stuff for him as well, or keep an eye on the area while he's putting things away. But we can then come up with some immediate solutions. And then if I approach this with a mindset of curiosity, I might ask, how often does this happen that the deliveries are turning up late? Oh, you know what? It happens every other week. Oh, okay. So every other week you're in this like crisis mode and you're having to manage all of these problems. Then that's a different conversation. I'll tell you what, let's go and have a chat with the manager after we've dealt with this and just see what we can do about that. And then we talk to the supplier. What can we do with the supplier? You know, can they actually do something differently to make sure they turn up when expected? Or do we need to come up with just a very easy, quick protocol of how to manage this situation more effectively if we do get a late delivery? But all of this comes about if we just talk to people like grown-up adults, and rather than, you know, and assuming the best in people, and rather than just assuming that if something's wrong, then people are either some sort of deviant or they're some sort of child or they're a fool for doing something that we think is being dangerous. So that would be my mindset shift. But behind that, though, Amir, is this, you know, fundamentally having a respect for people and a curiosity and a respect when we talk to them, I think.
That's important. And maybe for my next podcast, I will use this line. So we should talk to people, not talk at people. That is a very powerful line. And I think so. If all the management or leadership just understand this simple phrase, which you said very right, so it will change the mindset. And this is very right. When we put ourselves into the shoes of other person who's practically doing the work, then the things could be sorted out in a very different way. So Nick, listening to you is really reinforced why we at Oasis we focus on practical learning, leadership thinking, and real behavior changes, not just on the policies and the certifications. So our goal is also to help individuals and the organization to move towards the modern human created safety. So it should be human centered, not just moving left and right and talking more about the standards which were made in 19 and now it is not very practical, I will say.
Yeah.
So before we close, I want to share something with our audience that this podcast is a part of new ongoing series. And from now onwards, we will be bringing more conversations like this with the industrial experts, leaders, and the practitioners to share the real insight, practical lessons, and honest discussions about the health, safety, well-being, and leadership. So if this conversation added a value, please follow the page, share the session with the audience, and stay connected. So, Nick, to close today's conversation, my last question. I can ask you a lot of questions. We have a really right mindset, but I'll try to conclude this by asking this question: like, what gives you hope about the future of safety and well-being, and what should the uh, professions should focus on next?
Okay. Um, I think some of the things that gives me hope is that we are beginning to bring in influences from other professions like occupational psychology. So we're beginning to see, you know, other theories informing how we work as a profession. I think that creates tensions for us though, because there are, let's call them traditionalists, people who are very much wedded for very good reasons. I'm not, you know, I don't want to be, you know, constantly criticizing them, but there are traditionalists who see the role create systems, uh, train people, enforce standards, monitor, and so on. That has a role to play, but we're getting this influx of new thinking coming in, and there is a tension at the moment in our profession between these maybe sort of slightly competing visions or philosophies around safety. So, am I just here to prevent harm, or am I here to actually promote well-being and promote good working lives for people? And that's what I think I'm here to do, is to make people's lives better, not just prevent harm. So I think in the coming years, I think we're probably going to see more of a debate around that. And sometimes it does get heated and sometimes a little bit toxic. And we probably need to take some of the poison out of that debate a little bit. But I think some of the other things that we need to do, we do need these practical solutions as well, Mia. I absolutely agree. But I think also we need to be having some discussions around ethics, and I know IOSH are doing some things around that, so we can think more about what's actually motivating us and driving us and helping us to recognize and navigating our way through some difficult decisions. And I also think that we need to be focusing on our critical thinking more as a profession, where we can actually say, well, Nick, why did I bring in this football card system? What made me think that that was an appropriate way of practicing? Are there, what assumptions do I have that told me that that was a good way of managing people? And so with those critical thinking skills, I think it will help us to pick and choose what interventions are actually most effective for the workplace that we're working in, rather than just assuming that there is just one way of managing safety, which isn't the case, because the way we manage safety in a manufacturing environment would probably look quite different to how we manage safety in an office or in a construction site. And so with critical thinking, we can go back to the basic principles and make them work in a way that makes sense for the context that we're in.
Exactly, and that is very valid point, that we should see the bigger picture, not deal everyone in a same way with the same stick, I would say. So I think so. The goal is right, that we are not here to prevent harms. We are here to make the life better. Because ultimately, the person who is working on site is the source of income for us. If those people got injured, those got hurt, so all of us who are sitting in offices or who are directing the organization will be of no use. So the whole purpose of the management should be that they should think about the people who are on the ground. Do you agree with me, Nick?
Oh, absolutely. And and they think about the people on the ground, not just in terms of they are a source of income for me and my company, but actually they're human beings. And we deserve to be respected and we deserve to have good lives. We weren't put on this planet to be in a state of misery or fear. Let's give people good lives and respect them as human beings. And that means, for me, and not everyone's going to share this view, but for me, that means going beyond just harm prevention. We absolutely need to do that. And if that's all we do, then okay, that's fine. But for me, it's going beyond harm prevention. How can we make people's working lives better so that they, can at least, try and work towards their potential and have a good life?
Nick, you caught me on the very right point, and this is what I want to hear from you. Because when we think people are resources or are a source of income, it shouldn't be that. It should be that a person, is a human being, and we have all the rights to be respected.
Mm.
You got me very right on this point. So, Nick, thank you very much for your time, your
Thank you.
insights, and for challenging us to think beyond the compliance. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So we'll hope to see you all guys very soon. The recording of this will be available on LinkedIn, on OHS's Facebook page, and on my YouTube channel, which is Safety by Amar Shahzad. So once again, Nick, thank you very much for your time. So all of you guys and Nick, stay safe, stay
Thank you.
curious, and take care of yourself. So I'll be ending this live stream now. So thank you very much.